All right, this is a pretty good topic, I think. We're going to talk about the pulmonary system. This is just one study that looked at a type of training that you're going to do to improve your pulmonary function. We won't talk about the details of the study itself, but I think what we can gain here is just some insights on what really happens when we train the pulmonary system. In particular, there are two ways your pulmonary system functions. It's pretty simple. You're going to take either bigger breaths, that's going to be called tidal volume. We also have how fast you're breathing. If you're taking shallow breaths, that means your volume is smaller. Hence, there's a likelihood that you might get short of breath, especially if you're doing a more tasking activity. Also, once we start exercising, anyone who's exercising knows that you're going to breathe faster. So if you're not able to breathe fast enough, that also can contribute into you being short of breath, you getting fatigued. So those are the two components that really determine how functional your breathing is. There are two time points, time 0 and then time 1. So time 0 is just their baseline, and then time 1 is what happens after they did the exercise training. So typically, you're going to hope that your breathing performance gets better after you do some training. So what we want to do is compare time 0, which was their baseline, to how their breathing performance was after they did the training. And we can see here those two parts that I talked about with the respiratory rate, so how fast you're breathing, and then tidal volume, which is how big of a breath you're taking. So when we look at the difference between the two, we can see the bulk of the changes occur here. We can also see how deep, how big of a breath they were taking also changed. When we look at what's going on, we can see this difference. So this is after they were done with training, and this is their baseline. What this is showing is that the respiratory rate, or how rapid they were breathing, was lower after they did training. And then we also look at this part here and we see the difference in how big of a breath they were taking. In this situation, we see after training that they were actually taking bigger breaths. And that is common all throughout. All throughout, they were taking bigger breaths compared to where they were at baseline. So before training, time 0, we see what's typical of people who are untrained, who are sedentary. We see rapid and shallow breaths. And this is called tachypnea. Rapid, shallow breathing is not very effective. It's not efficient for supporting the activity. You're doing a little too much for the activity, which then leads you to becoming more fatigued. Now, when we go through training or someone becomes more fit, we see the type of breathing change and transition into what's called hyperpnea. Hyperpnea is taking big breaths, okay? It's still rapid, but it's bigger. So what we see demonstrated here is deep and quick breaths. The breathing still has to be quick because we need it to maintain the activity. But the difference is, since we're taking bigger breaths, deeper breaths, we don't need to breathe as rapidly. Because we're not breathing as rapidly, our breathing rate after training can be lower, but we also see that the depth of the breathing is bigger. So the moral of the story here is, once you do your breathing exercises, it changes the way you're breathing. Instead of taking rapid, shallow breaths, you can take these deep, quick breaths, which are much more efficient. And that can translate into improved endurance, you being able to do more of the exercise without being fatigued.